All right, it's 2:05 and it looks like we are at critical mass, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Today's webinar, as you can see on your screen, is going to be Ransomware, Government Responsibility and Individual Responsibility Explained. So our subject matter experts today are Stephen Kennen and Domingo Rivera. We're very lucky to have them, and I'll give them both a proper introduction as we get into today's webinar. I just wanted to explain the title a little bit. So government responsibility and your responsibility explained would have been a more accurate title, just so everyone understands where we're going with this theme. So just a little bit of background on our organization before we dive in. The National Cybersecurity Alliance is a group of convening partners who recognize the strength in the security collective. We believe in educating individuals and organizations on cybersecurity best practices, and we believe in amplifying collective efforts to increase cybersecurity awareness. This, of course, supports our goal of creating a more secure, interconnected world, and that's what Cybersecure My Business seeks to do with small and medium-sized businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises. I would encourage you to follow us on Twitter, on LinkedIn and Facebook. You can stay plugged into all of the resources, education, and events that we offer. You can also visit us online at StaySafeOnline.org, as well as the StaySafeOnline blog on our website. And I'd like to thank our sponsors for making programs like this one possible. Stephen Kennen is from Proactive IT, who will be joining us later on, and we're very grateful to them for having sponsored today's webinar. We, of course, have other sponsorship opportunities available. If you enjoy our content or if you would like to help educate the public, we have signature sponsorships, and we have contributing sponsorships and affiliate level sponsorships. These are all different levels of sponsorships. And our reach goes as far as over 10,000 webinar attendees a year, and over 5,000 workshop attendees a year, and over 14,000 subscribers for newsletters and other email communications. And of course, we have Cybersecurity Awareness Month coming up in October. I'm sure everyone is either very excited or very stressed out about that. Next month's program for Cybersecure My Business is going to be called Cybersecurity in a Flash. It's going to be a symposium style event, and we'll be exploring ransomware recovery, response and recovery with several different speakers, 5 minutes each, to give everyone a chance to learn something new from each small session. So why are we talking about ransomware, government responsibility, and individual responsibility? Today, we're going to cover this topic because we know that, especially for the small and medium-sized business community, there's a raised level of concern, and while it's justified, there should also be an increased level of understanding to go with that concern, to serve that concern. And then, of course, we know that there have been several headlines from last year to this year that are still on the front of everyone's minds, and we want to be able to address those concerns. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers, the first of which is Stephen Kennen. He is a speaker, cybersecurity and compliance expert, and fractional CTO. He is a seasoned entrepreneur and technology veteran with over 25 years of experience. He is currently the president of Proactive IT, a Charlotte-based IT firm serving hundreds of local organizations. Steve is a continuing education presenter, a partner of the North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys and the Mecklenburg County Bar. He is also a supporter, of course, as you can see today, of the National Cybersecurity Alliance, and he is also the founding member of the Evolve Group in Charlotte, North Carolina, a fractional C-suite for small and medium-sized businesses seeking to overcome growth hurdles. He is very passionate about education. Steve regularly publishes thought leadership content on cybersecurity and other topics at weareproactive.com/blog. So if you'd like to check that out. And if you took note, many of you may be joining us from the North Carolina area. This particular webinar is definitely a regionally specific webinar. So we'll see more about that in both Steve and Domingo's presentations. So our other speaker today is also a subject matter expert from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Domingo Rivera is joining us. He's a cybersecurity advisor in Region 4, North Carolina, within the Department of Homeland Security's DHS Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. DOM is assigned to North Carolina within Region 4. Cybersecurity advisors are CISA cybersecurity professionals who assist in critical infrastructure owners and operators to make improvements in their cybersecurity posture. CISA has worked with members of all 16 critical infrastructure sectors. DOM is currently based in Raleigh, North Carolina. Prior to joining DHS, Mr. Rivera served as an information security consultant and as a cybersecurity attorney for Fortune 500 companies in the software and banking sectors, as well as the U.S. Department of the Navy. Mr. Rivera has also qualified as an expert level witness in legal cases related to cybersecurity and computer forensics, and was also a member of a cyber law firm. Mr. Rivera holds a BS in computer engineering and an MS in information technology, as well as a Juris Doctorate. So that was a mouthful. As you can see, we have very qualified speakers with us today. So I'll go ahead and hand the microphone off to Mr. Rivera to get us started, and then we'll dive right in with some discussion questions for both him and Steve. Dom, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Sarmina. And I'm not going to take a whole lot of time with the presentation. I want us to be able to get into a discussion here with Steven and the group. So, but I did want to take a little bit of time to introduce the CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Many people don't know the name. It's a relatively newer agency. It used to be an internal part of the Department of Homeland Security. Now it is still part of DHS, but it operates as its own agency. So what we do, the next slide. There you go. We are essentially the nation's risk advisor. So we work with partners to defend against threats and to collaborate. We are different from other government agencies. Obviously, everybody is familiar with the FBI, which is has a great cyber program. The FBI has a law enforcement option, has a law enforcement purpose. We have more of an advisory role in terms of advising and mitigating risk to the nation's critical infrastructure. So next slide, please. This is kind of a similar thing. It's basically what it tries to underpin is that our main goal is to form partnerships between the federal government, state, local, and tribal governments and the private sector, and to share information and build capacity and promote good practices, not only in a daily operations, but also in terms of incident management and response. Next slide, please. And when we talk about the 16 critical infrastructure sectors that CISA services, these are the 16 where you can see there, it goes from chemical to water and nuclear reactors. And in this case, we're talking a lot about healthcare and public health professionals are involved here. Other agencies that get involved, like the DoD handles the defense sector, DOE handles energy, but we are cross-sectional. We basically extend throughout all 16 of them. Next slide, please. We are divided into regions. They correspond to the FEMA regions. And in this case, I am part of Region 4, which is headquartered in Atlanta, and it serves 8 states. It is perhaps the largest region that we have, and it's a very important region. I am stationed in Raleigh, North Carolina area, and I am specifically detailed to the state of North Carolina. And we have some of my colleagues are detailed within the other 8 states and 6 tribal nations that are represented as part of Region 4. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to have this slide present. I'm not going to read all of that, but I wanted to introduce some of the security offerings that we have for private or public sector stakeholders within the 16 critical infrastructure sectors. So it includes, and the most important part is the preparedness activities, information sharing, and but we also get involved to a certain extent with response assistance. We do assist companies with assessments and working groups and seminars, coordinating with incident assistance, and we also coordinate with law enforcement when necessary and when the company wants us to be involved in that, if it is a private sector company. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides, I'm not going to also not going to go through all of those, but if you can read them later, these are some of the assessments and services that CISA provides, and I do have to disclose that these are at no charge to the company. This is paid for by the taxpayers, as the DHS is heavily involved in securing the nation's critical infrastructure, and it starts. That not only means big enterprises, actually medium-sized and smaller enterprises that perhaps don't have the kind of robust security programs that some of the larger enterprises have. And obviously, all it takes is one flaw somewhere in order for the entire sector to be affected. So this one and the next slide are some of the services that we offer, both from a strategic planning assessments all the way to actual vulnerability scanning. So next slide, please.
Thank you for sharing these. I think these are the types of services and questions that we encounter from the SMB community every time we do one of these events. So we appreciate you including this.
Okay. And that last one only has some points of contact for you to maintain. It has my my direct number. It also has an email for general inquiries, as well as in case there are any concerns, if there are any security issues that anybody encounters and wants to share with us. We have everything from requesting assessments to actually sharing malware with us. We can point you to that direction, and if you encounter any malware, obviously if it is shared, then we can not only assist the individual reporting entity with the analysis, but also assist others in identifying it quickly. So with that was all the introduction I wanted to give, and we can get on with the conversation.
Great, thank you for that. So I want to pull both you and Steve back into the conversation. If you guys could turn on your cameras for the discussion portion. I'm sure the audience would love to see you guys. So the first question I want to ask to kick off the discussion portion is, what is probably on everyone's minds today based on the title of this webinar? So Domingo, you talked a little bit about the responsibilities that CISA can partake in as far as incident assistance. So now I would love to get some insight from both you and Steve on what would you say, or how would you scope the individual or the individual business's responsibilities?
Yes, absolutely. And the first thing to recognize is that although we are seeing a lot of incidents of malware ransomware in the news. The underlying issues of good cyber hygiene and preventive measures are still the same. And I would like to point out that the biggest vectors of attack for ransomware are remote access software and phishing. And we have been obviously familiar with phishing for many years. It is still the largest attack vector, and in this case, it is leading to ransomware attacks. And just to be clear, ransomware is where there is a breach, and then as a result of the breach, the intruder who may have breached the company and just sat there for some time, not doing anything with that access, and then at some point the intruder is going to go and encrypt all the files that company has or whatever files they can connect to, and then they will demand a payment, usually in the form of a Bitcoin or some other type of blockchain-based payment that is not traceable, in order to decrypt those files. So that is the initial definition that we have for ransomware. But the initial vector is still being remote desktop protocol, which is remote access software. And obviously everybody, I won't say everybody, a lot of people use that. It is used frequently for performing technical support, IT department, remote support. It is a very useful service to have, but it is still a big vector. And obviously phishing, which is when you click on a link that you receive via email.
Thank you for going over the definition as well. I know we have people of all levels of understanding on the call. So, Steve, I know that you work with hundreds of businesses in the region. So, talk to us a little bit about what you see.
I think I see exactly what Domingo just expressed, which is the bad actors are using automation. I think that's the one thing that I would add. Typically, they're trying to find easy vulnerabilities, and then they'll exploit those in a targeted fashion after they've found them. And remote access is absolutely one of the primary ways that they're doing it, especially since COVID and the shift to work from home. It's just become a target-rich environment for them, because people who are working from home often have a lot less security than when they're working from the office. And then also phishing, because humans are vulnerable. And so, you know, if there are lots of things for you to take away from this. The first thing I want you all to take away from this is, if you're not doing it today, you want to implement two-factor or multi-factor authentication on everything you can, especially remote access and email, because if they compromise your email, it becomes much easier for them to leverage your identity to try to capture other people's information, right? So they'll use your email, if they can compromise it, to go try to trick other people with phishing messages. And then the other is two-factor authentication is, as far as I understand it, pretty much the best practice for protecting remote access and access to any accounts anywhere. And we deploy that literally everywhere we can, where it's available.
Do the businesses that you assist on a daily basis, do you think they understand the difference between what they maybe need to report to CISA versus what they may need to report to law enforcement when it comes to?
I don't actually. I don't think anybody really understands that piece of the puzzle at this point. We've only been involved in one compromise in the last 3 or 4 years in our customer base, and honestly, all the customer was interested in was recovery, which we were able to do extremely quickly. It didn't dawn on us, frankly, even as the IT provider, until after the fact, that we should have involved law enforcement so that they could have identified the threat and used that information to help others. And frankly, by the time we thought of that, we had already completely restored the entire network, and there was no sign of it anymore. So it wouldn't have helped after the fact. So you know, as a panelist, I'm interested in learning more about what CISA and other government organizations would want our responsibilities to be. Because you know, recovery is time sensitive, right? My customers want to get back quickly. We don't want to wait for somebody else to come check it out before we fix it. But there's the other side of that coin that I think Domingo could speak to very clearly.
Yeah, Dom, could you shed some light on, you know, I'm sure some of the business owners on here are curious what is the difference when they should report to CISA or when they should be looking to report to the FBI or other law enforcement agencies.
Absolutely. So CISA does not work as a law enforcement agency, meaning that our purpose is not to catch the bad guy, but to help the business. So it's a little bit of a different angle to keep in mind. Obviously, whether to report a breach to law enforcement, it's a very individual decision for the business, and that is because it could have legal consequences. And the one thing that I've seen come to mind in performing many assessments is the reputation aspect to it. So obviously that does keep some reporting from happening, at least on the law enforcement side, and that's why I always like to emphasize, and I know Steve brought it up in terms of the preparation, the practices to do in order to keep from being a victim to ransomware or any other cyber breach. And I know Steve mentioned multi-factor authentication. That is extremely critical. But one thing that is even easier, day-to-day type of thing, is to maintain all software and systems patched. Whether it's your computer, your smartphone, every time some of this, you see some of these updates that come out and they say the security of your device has been improved, that's a clear sign. You should update. And so sometimes some of those updates are a result of researchers finding vulnerabilities that could be exploited. And those vulnerabilities, the way that works is the researcher will let the company know ahead of time prior to releasing it publicly. And the company usually will issue an update, patching that device, closing that vulnerability, and then the researcher may disclose that. And once it's disclosed, then the hackers are out there, they monitor these disclosures, and then they found a vector. So that's kind of a long way to say keep systems patched and updated. Also, develop an incident response plan. We do at the CISA website, CISA.gov. There are a lot of resources, and it includes things like templates that companies can leverage for developing incident response plans. But please don't see it as just develop a piece of paper. This has to be a living process, so it has to be understood. Everybody should know what their role is in terms of incident response and continuing the operation of the business. So these templates are more of a guide. It makes you think of the practices you have to implement, whether you can do it in-house or whether you get an outside consultant or an expert like Steve or any others to help you with that. That's up to the individual company, but it's important to think about it. And another important thing is to segment any critical systems. So once a malware gets in with something like ransomware and it starts encrypting, the best way you can have is to have this system segmented one from the other so that one cannot infect the other. And obviously do not keep the backups in the same network as the main network. But and I do know I went a lot into this prevention stuff. Direct answer to your question is CISA can provide advisory and consulting services and workshops in order to stress the prevention part, which is the best medicine. When it comes to that, whether you're going to contact law enforcement or try to do it in-house or hire a consultant or ask the government for help, that is a very individual answer. It's something that every company has to look at their own profile and their own policies and their own considerations and make that decision at that point. I would never tell everyone that everybody should contact law enforcement, because that's not in my place to do. But it is certainly a very, very individual decision that has to be made by management having all the information.
Yeah, Domingo, I think that's a super good point. And as Domingo said just a few minutes ago, having an incident response plan, you don't want to be trying to decide whether or not your business wants to call law enforcement when you're in the middle of a breach, right? You want to go through that thought process ahead of time and define how it is you're going to behave if a breach happens. Another great example is, do you have a cyber insurance carrier, and do you need to call them? Who's responsible for calling them? When do you call them, and how do you contact them? And so that's what an incident response plan does for your business. Is you think through the answer to all of those questions ahead of time, and you have them documented so that when it's time to act, it can be effective and efficient and rapid. And I think that's critical. And
So
go ahead.
would you both recommend doing some kind of incident response drills to keep people sharp on these types of plans?
Yeah, I certainly would say that, prior planning is really important and practice is really important. In our business, we are constantly drilling our backup and recovery plans, for example. It's hard to mimic a cyber breach, but it's certainly not hard to pull out the incident response plan and review it as a team periodically and make sure everybody's clear on it.
Yeah, and I second that. One thing that we have seen being effective is to have a well thought out tabletop exercise where all the people who know or who would be responsible for performing actions sit down, and then you start the what if process, brainstorming and going through the plan. And it could be something like, our servers get hit with ransomware. They are encrypted right now. What do we do, and who does it? And if you're asking the question and the answer is not obvious, and then it's time to keep working on that plan. So it should be almost automatic, no second thought. You pull the plan and you start going through it. And obviously understanding that no plan is perfect and you may have to deviate from the plan as the situation moves along. But at least at that point, you're not coordinating, like Steven said. Do we call the insurance carrier and then spend precious time debating that kind of decision? Or do we talk to law enforcement? Or such and such is on vacation. How do we get in touch with him? Well, he has the only password. He's the only one with access for disconnecting this other system. Where is the equipment? Is there like a closet that has brooms as well as cables? And where is it? So all of those things, and these are all like real life scenarios, come to play. And if everybody sits down and have it all planned out, and also like Steven mentioned, the backup. Where is the backup? How long is it going to take us to restore it? And how much data can we afford to lose? So if our backup is a day old, from a business perspective, is that good enough? Could it be a week old? These are all important decisions that vary from company to company. But it's things that have to be thought out so that if the worst happens, then you can go back. Like something like ransomware. If you have a properly secured backup, whether it's offsite, off network, or however you choose to implement it, and you know who has what and who can get to it, then it's obviously going to make your life a lot easier.
Yeah, Domingo, that backup point is so important. In my experience, very few companies look at how their backups are designed, and very few IT departments ask the business what the requirements are. For example, if you're a business owner or a business manager and nobody's asked you what your expectations for recovery are, that's a huge red flag, because you can't define or design a recovery process unless you know what expectation you're seeking to meet. For example, can your business be down for a day, 3 days, a week, an hour? Can it never be down? Right? You need to answer those questions so that when you define the response plan, you know that the plan is going to meet the business requirements.
And to even, my apologies. You just made such a good point. I was going to just add one part to it about the backups. You also have to have plan for this. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the question, is like sometimes these bad actors just sit there for some time. So part of incident response is trying to find this patient zero to make sure that your backup itself is not infected. So that is the one important point I wanted to bring. So sometimes your initial backups have to be from images or something that you know for a fact that is clean before you go back and then you encounter an encrypted backup to go with your encrypted server.
That's all fantastic advice. That's one of the things that came up in our last webinar as well, is that a lot of businesses or business people have not considered the interruption to business continuity. Your mention of how long can your business be down. So I'm really glad that you guys brought up all those points. We do have some questions coming in from the audience that I would like to address. So Steve, a question for you, since I think you brought up the multi-factor authentication. Could you define two-factor authentication? Or how would you define it?
Sure. Basically, what it means is you need something other than a username and password to be accessing a system. And it's another way to assure that you're the person who should be accessing that system, a second factor or multiple second factors, third factors, however you want to define it. And so the example is very simple. And the reason is very simple. If you are just using a username and password, one, it can be compromised using brute force very frequently if your password isn't very long. And two, what's the first thing that a bad guy is going to do if they manage to gain access to your computer? They're going to watch it and try to find all your usernames and passwords so they can go and compromise every system you access. But if there's another factor of authentication, and so typically it's a code that's sent to you that changes frequently. And for example, I have it on my smartphone. Without that code, having a username and password isn't enough to gain access to a system. So for example, nobody can log into my bank account without having that extra factor of authentication, that extra way of confirming it's me, or my email, or my company's network servers, or anything. I mean, we have two-factor authentication on everything because usernames and passwords aren't particularly good security protocol anymore because everybody's trying to break them or steal them.
I would just add to that.
Go ahead.
I would just add to that there's SMS authentication. There's also authentication apps that you can use on your phone.
Yeah.
And then of course there's also security keys, which are like physical security keys. So if you have any other questions about that, feel free to reach out to us via email and we can get you more information on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then another question from the audience was, do you think that the lack of business reporting is leading to more ransomware gangs getting away with cybercrime? That's a great question.
That is a very interesting question. I think the big issue that it brings out is this issue of embarrassment and shaming, and I think that applies to every cybercrime. And I tell everyone I see that if you click on by accident, you click on a link that contains a phishing malware that results in a compromise, this is no different from when you, if you leave your house and by accident you leave a window partially open, or you forget to lock the door because you're in a hurry and somebody breaks in. You are still a victim. You were the victim of a crime. It is not your fault. And I think that is the part of education that we have to keep promoting, that you didn't do something wrong because somebody committed a crime against you. And from a business side, it is kind of the same thing. If you report it, does it make me look bad? And the direct answer to the question is, I am not sure at this point, and this is speaking for myself, not on this one in particular is my personal opinion, not on behalf of DHS. I am not sure it is causing such an impact because there is now a trend called ransomware as a service, where these bad actors are actually buying software. They have a business model where they can essentially scan unsuspecting people on the internet, find vulnerabilities, and then they split the proceeds. The maker of the software and whoever used it, they just split the proceeds. So it seems like they're blindly targeting whoever they can find. So I think at this point, the lack of reporting may not be as critical as it could have been some time ago, because of the business model that the bad actors have created to just target anything and anyone they can find.
Yeah, and Domingo, I would add to that since the motive for these automated attacks typically is financial, the real issue is that people are paying the ransoms. And I would passionately argue that it does not take a lot of very specific, very well-known preventative measures to put your business in a position where it would never have to pay a ransom. And I said earlier on this call that in 4 years, I had one customer who fell victim to a ransomware attack, and they were up and running the next day. And the reason they were up and running the next day is because we have really good secure backup processes in place, right? Just like you said earlier, you need to make sure that the backups are protected from the ransomware. And you can do that with what you described as network segmentation, technical term for making it hard to get to it. We use hardening of the hardware itself to make it inaccessible to anybody from the outside. But at the end of the day, if your backups are safe, then recovering is easy. And then the other really important part of backups is testing the backups. I come across companies every day that think their backups are okay because the backup software is running, who can't recover from those backups because they're not tested and managed in a disciplined manner. And so it doesn't take a lot. It just takes discipline, is what I tell people. It doesn't take a lot. It just takes discipline. And most businesses aren't disciplined about their backups, which is why they hire companies like my company to make sure that their backups are managed in a disciplined fashion.
What would you say?
Go ahead.
What would you say to a company or an individual that might say what if it's faster to pay the ransom than it is to get the backup? Do you get what I'm saying?
I do. I would say that I would gladly test my recovery process against paying a ransom, and I'll beat it 100% of the time. Plus, you don't have to pay the ransom. So, yeah, I don't buy that argument, because if you're doing backups in a really, well-managed, disciplined way, recovery is fast. I mean, super fast, right? I can cover an entire network of servers and PCs in less than a day. I mean, it's boom. You just restore everything if you've got it properly backed up and managed. Really, the problem is that people don't understand what a good backup is. They think that if it's being backed up to the cloud, they're safe because it's off-site, and typically it's not. You're not going to be able to recover as quickly as you think, if at all, with those kinds of configurations. There's some really specific methodologies that allow you to be resilient and to allow you to have quick recovery that only a very small fraction of businesses today implement.
We also have a hygiene question that came in from the audience as well. Do VPNs also help protect or defend against ransomware?
VPN, and for anybody that's basically a virtual private network, that is a service that is designed to protect some of your traffic between your source, your company, and its destination through an encrypted tunnel. So encryption is always an important thing, and where I could see that VPN could be helpful is because of its encryption. And we talked a little bit ago about the remote software, remote access. Obviously, if it is through an encrypted tunnel, through a VPN, obviously it's better than using plain remote desktop protocol or something not encrypted. So there are some benefits to VPN. I do not think it cures for the actual lack of proper practices and proper hygiene. If you have an exposure within your network, you're connected to it more securely perhaps, but it still does not mitigate that which could be exploited by an outside actor. So
yeah, two-factor. VPN is remote access, right, Domingo?
yes.
Therefore, you should have two-factor or multi-factor authentication on it, and then it's helpful. It's part of the puzzle, right? But it's not an answer by any means.
Right. It just helps from somebody perhaps being able to intercept unencrypted traffic, but it does nothing to mitigate an existing underlying vulnerability that could still be exploited.
Got it. Those are all great answers. I do have another question. So we talked about the delivery methods for ransomware. One of them was phishing and the other is remote desktop, right? So which one is more, I guess, popular these days? Where do we find more attacks being delivered?
I think at this point, they're both very remote access has been accelerating to say the least, especially in the past year or so. I still think that phishing is the #1 vector, and it might always still be that way because I mean we're all humans, and phishing, it's basically the premise is to trick someone to do something, which has been kind of the basis of any type of crime, not just cybercrime. And there are so many ways to do this. You know, even like social networking for businesses. People use LinkedIn. People attend conferences where they give out contact information. They discuss sometimes what they do within their business. Security conference. They are well known for, hey, we do this, we don't do that. We have this type of system. So still, you will always see criminals are always going to target the human the most. Obviously the other method is gaining popularity because it's so easy. You know, these attackers can do it from anywhere in the world, and there is pre-made software that they can basically just use for that. So they're both very dangerous. If I had to pick one, I still think phishing is ahead, but the other one is very serious and also very dangerous.
Yeah,
Right.
phishing is harder to stop too, right? Because we can shore up remote access so that it's not vulnerable. You just need to do the scans, right? Some of the services that CISA offers are, you know, vulnerability scanning. If it's vulnerable, you can find it and fix it. Human beings, however, you know, they're harder to protect because they're human. You know, we are all human. You know, you can do phishing education for your employees and phishing testing to look for opportunities for where more phishing education would be would be beneficial. You know, I don't know, Domingo, do you have any other approaches other than training and testing to help with the phishing problem?
With phishing, those are the two most important things. You know, to secure the humans. I mean, there are other approaches that could be taken on the technical side. You know, some people do whitelisting authentication so that you can only access certain systems if you are actually in a certain place or coming from a certain application that shouldn't be taken to another one. But it's still, it always boils down to the humans. Even if you, outside of the email phishing type of stuff, you see things like inserting an infected USB stick on the computer because somebody wants to take work home, and they are not aware that that device may be infected. It goes into your supply chain. What if the device came infected when you bought it? Because you don't know where it came from. So it still always boils down to that person inserted that USB stick, which caused someone to access the network. So it is always training and education and awareness. And the difficulty for anybody in the security field is to get everybody to understand this is kind of everybody's issue, and everybody should understand it because it's the one thing everybody understands. Physical security, they know, you know, don't leave the office door open. But the cyber one, it's harder to visualize. So training and education, it's still the best thing to do.
That's music to my ears. 'Cause that's what we do here. We have some really great questions coming in from the audience, and we don't have a lot of time left, so I'm just gonna get to some of those. What is the impact of migrating critical systems to the cloud with regards to risks? Is the risk higher or lower?
I can give you a quick answer. There are pros and there are cons to it. I think the cloud was not necessarily created to make you more secure. It's a different method of delivery than it is to having your own server. So if you're worried about things like an earthquake taking down your building, obviously the cloud is going to protect you with that. If you're worried about access by bad actors, having the server in the cloud may not create that big of a difference. So it is a business decision, and I don't believe that cloud or on-premise, they can both be properly secured to the best of each individual method, and there are good practices that could be implemented in one or the other. I don't think one is inherently safer than the other one.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer. It depends. I mean,
As is the answer with many things in security, right? And then the next question is, how do you overcome the new tactic where ransomware attackers are often exfiltrating data and then threatening to release it if they don't get their ransom?
Oh, that's a super good question. Mind if I start with that one?
Please go ahead.
Absolutely.
So I guess the answer is once it's been exfiltrated, there's not a lot you're going to do, right? So you need to prevent the exfiltration in the first place. And so there are some ways that you can monitor much more granularly what's going on a computer network to look for those signs of compromise. I like to call it, if you've ever read any of my blogs, the silent bad actor problem, which is the bad guy gets on the network and looks for ways to compromise you. One way, Domingo said earlier, is they might sabotage your backups, and then when they know you no longer have good backups, deploy a payload of ransomware. Another way is to gain access to your critical data, steal it by exporting it, and then once they have it, using that to extort money from you by threatening to publish your information. And so what you want to do is you want to deploy technologies. There's one called SIEM, S-I-E-M, which is Security, Information, and Event Management. Basically means sending all of the logs from all of the important systems on a network to a very smart database that uses AI and behavioral analysis to look for the signs of those infiltrations so that you can stop them before they get to exfiltrating data. You can also watch for unusual patterns of data transfer, like lots of data being exported at 3 a.m. on your network, and that would set off a red flag in a security operations center, ideally. And those SOC employees would stop that exfiltration of data in the middle of the night so that it doesn't actually happen. So these are the kinds of approaches that we've found so far for trying to manage that issue. Domingo, what do you have to add?
I think you've pretty much covered it in terms of having processes that detect things that are out of the ordinary. So if Steven only works 8 hours a day and he's always at the office from 8 to 5, and sometimes occasionally logs in remotely from home from 7 to 9, and then all of a sudden you notice that Steven is transferring a lot of data on a Saturday, and you have the logs in place and something monitoring those, then those are the type of behaviors that you can notice, and you may be able to catch the data exfiltration going on. Once the data is exfiltrated, it comes back. I think it is the same concept as it is with paying the ransomware in the first place to unlock your systems. Obviously, the CISA does not recommend paying a ransom, and the reasons for that are obvious. You have no guarantees. This is some random person that you're paying to with the hope that they will do their part and decrypt your system. There have been reported cases of people being targeted again or extorted to pay even more. So the fear of one loss may continue to compound and never end. And I think the last point is it brings us back to the incident response plan. You should have that plan down and understood to the point of it even includes whether you're going to pay a ransom or not. It should be that detailed so that everybody knows what the plan is, and whether you're going to pay or not, that is part of the plan.
Thanks for that. There is another question also. What would you suggest for protecting mobile devices from ransomware attacks? Are the same recommendations that you both made for computers and networks transferable to mobile devices?
To a certain extent, they are. For mobile devices, the one thing is, like I mentioned earlier, about keeping them patched and updated with the latest software. Some vendors are better than others in terms of releasing updates. Some devices go out of an update cycle where they are no longer supported by the manufacturer. And mobile devices is hard. It's a very difficult thing. There are so many. People would say, well, there's only Apple and Android, but even Android is very fragmented. There's many different versions, and Apple will release some updates to a certain extent. So it's all about the practices. Anything that has a computer can be compromised, and the same practices, secure practices, apply to all of them.
Right.
Yeah, the other big issue is that companies don't always own all of the computers that are being used to access their networks, right? Employees will use their individual iPhones to get to their company email. And so there's a really important conversation to be had around what you can actually do from a control perspective when you're working in what's called a BYOD, bring your own device space. It's harder than computer networks, but there are definitely practices that can improve the protections.
Well, we are reaching the end of our time. I do want to ask one last very important question that, business owners and business people are usually overwhelmed with tasks and responsibilities. So considering they're super busy, if there are only one or two things they remember from today's program, what would each of you say that they should remember?
Make sure your backups are good. and that they're meeting your business's requirements. Because if my experience is any indication in all of the small business people I talk to, maybe 20% are good, and about 80% of you small business owners right now don't have what you think you have. So look into it.
Great. Dom, did you want to add to that?
Yes, and you're going to get a repeat there. When it comes to ransomware, good backups that are correctly created and secure and are your very best bet for recovering. So I will just basically just repeat that, whether and have a plan, make a decision where this backup is going to be stored. Is it going to be online, offline, somewhere offsite? So the backup part is very important. And the second point would be practice good cyber hygiene. So have a regular cadence for scanning of vulnerabilities. CISA does that at no cost. Also, a basic scan for just tells you what you can see from the internet and what you can't, and it might give you some pointers that of things that you have to either fix in house or hire someone to fix it for you. But at least it's a basic scan, mimics what an opponent may be doing as a preliminary scan. So backups and hygiene.
Thank you both for that. Steve, did you want to add anything else?
No, backups and hygiene. Absolutely. Yeah. Patch and update, basic security principles. It's not rocket science, and it's not even that expensive. You just got to do it.
Well, we will make sure that everyone who signed up for the program today receives the slides so they know resources are included in there from Dom. We'll make sure that, Steve, we add some resources from Proactive IT as well. Thank you both so much for taking the time and sharing your knowledge with us today. And thank you to all of our attendees. Of course, don't forget about our upcoming cybersecurity in a flash in Cybersecurity Awareness Month, October 14th. And I think that's all. Everyone enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thank you.